Okay, so I submit to being, yeah, there's a flashing red light just in a like in a physical studio.
So there is.
Okay, so the purpose of this meeting from my perspective is to go through some mechanics to get you set up with systematic practice. In the process of doing that, we'll probably have many excursions into various geek domains. So I want to leave it open for those possibilities also. Um, how does that notion work for you?
That sounds wonderful.
Okay, but it's your meeting, so what you'd like to do, you give me the cues, and you can reflect. And uh, I would like to have a quality interchange of energy and information around this topic. So probably the most practical way to go about this, if it's uh, aligned with your interests, would be to get you set up to utilize the resources of the unified mindfulness community. And then I would have a collegial uh, connection to you in terms of science. Um, and then I can also serve as a resource to guiding your practice. Um, you probably know we're working on harnessing the new AI to somewhat replace some of the functions of people like me. That's something that we can talk about. Um, but right now, and there's a reason for that, because I only have so much time and energy. I'd like to give you my whole life. It's like nothing to do but help this one person. Uh, but can't do that. Fortunately, though, there are a lot of resources out there in the community that can supplement what you get from me in terms of our, interactions and so forth. So I'm going to give you some definitions uh, that will be relevant to working within the framework, but they're also relevant to the kind of science that me and Jay and some of our friends would like to do. So it's sort of uh, feeding two squirrels with one acorn or something. If, if you don't like killing two birds with one stone, it's not Buddhist. So see if we can give you something that will help you with your practice, but also will be relevant to professional conversations around research. Okay, so for the purposes of applied science, I would define practice or mindfulness practice or meditation, if you wanted to use that word, or any other synonym. If we're talking from the context of applied science, in other words, we want to benefit humanity, um, then I would say systematic focus training in the service of multidimensional human flourishing. If I were to be talking about the context of general science, which is broader and has other concerns besides, translational ones, I would have a similar but looser definition. It would be focus training in the service of something. So now we have to pin down what we mean by training, and we need to pin down what we mean by focus. So training means pretty much what it sounds like. And if the adjective systematic is in front of the training, it means things like training to be a musician, training in a professional skill, training in a hobby skill, sports training, uh, uniform service training, those kinds of trainings. Those are systematic trainings. So it's not something that is alien to modern culture, or for that matter, any culture. There are systematic trainings. So what makes it a focus path is that we're systematically training things that I'm going to call focus factors. We'll get to how to think about those in a moment. But we'll say that we develop focus factors. I like that verb. The training entails developing focus factors in a systematic way. It also entails applying focus factors in a systematic way. And since we're in the context of translational or applied science, what you're applying it to is something that we'll call multidimensional human flourishing, which we'll also ontologize in just a moment for you, to whatever degree of detail you're interested in. But it sort of means what it sounds like. It's like everyone wins in the end. Sarvodaya. I don't know if you ever heard the term in Sanskrit, sarva plus udaya. Gandhi, I believe, used it. It's used as a term in Sri Lanka, India, that region, Sanskrit influenced cultures. Udaya means uplifted, udaya. It's interesting. It's also the Buddhist word for arising, as in arising and passing, an important concept in Theravada formulations. But in any event, sarva means everyone. So sarva udaya, sarvodaya, it's a plan to uplift everyone. Does it mean it's a plan to solve all problems on earth? No, 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 no. But it's an idea for an uplifting, and it can be fairly distributed in the world. It is technologically, sociologically, and financially feasible to democratize access to this kind of training. So, developing and applying focus factors. Two sides to develop. This is basic for not getting confused when you look at world mysticism. when you look at world mysticism, there's a fundamental conflict that finally got resolved, as far as I'm concerned. And it's East, West, ancient, and modern. It's everywhere. From one perspective, this path is about developing focus factors de novo, cultivating, creating by your own effort something that wasn't there. From another perspective, this path is about discovering that there's nothing that needs to be improved in the moment for everyone. The nature of early neuronal processing uh, is the effortless effervescence of the Holy Spirit, call it what you want, nature, God, Deus sive natura. Anyway, this is speaking poetically, loosely, not scientifically right now. But in any event, it's already there. Well, then the training is to notice and not forget, but also you develop focus factors. You get better at concentrating on one little thing or a whole bunch of things at once, flexible concentration. You get better at that uh, with practice. So develop was chosen to span both concepts, some combination of you create focus factors de novo by, like you build muscle by lifting weights, versus, well, yeah, you build muscle by lifting weights, but your muscles already know, due to billions of years of evolution, those muscles know how to tell you to damage them in just the right way with the exercise so they grow back better. Well, that's a biological knowledge that's always there for everyone. It's in not just our DNA, it's probably deeper than that in terms of where that information is stored within us. But in any event, that's uh, just another sort of aspect of what I mean by developing the focus factors. So systematically developing, meaning some combination of creating and finding things like flexible concentration, sensory clarity, deep resilience that comes through the ability to allow the senses to flow without self-impedance. I call it equanimity, but you could call it deep resilience. Also, these are focus factors, but some traditions talk about other focus factors: oneness, spaciousness, fluidity, tranquility, spontaneity. So in the system, we list a wide range of focus factors, but the main sensory focus factors are flexible concentration, sensory clarity, and, let's say, deep equanimity. Not equanimity in a surface cool, but equanimity in a more deep evolutionary sense of non-self-interference or non-grasping moment by moment. That's a focus factor. Those are the main sensory ones that we talk about. But then we mention other focus factors when we give people interesting techniques that if they're interested in tranquility, well, you can explore see, hear, feel, rest. If you're interested in what the Tibetans are talking about when they talk about spaciousness, well, you can do see, hear, feel, space. If you're interested in Zen spontaneity, you can do see, hear, feel, expansion and contraction, bounce, et cetera, et cetera. So we cover a representative range of focus factors. However, two focus factors have been added to the system that have not traditionally been trained in the meditation systems of the past. They haven't been systematically trained. But they are what I'm going to call the secret sauce of why science works. And they're not unrelated to the historical meditation traditions. If you go back to India, in a sense, just like there was a Greek miracle in the axial age, there was an Indic miracle in the axial age. Humanity discovered that you could systematically train focus factors. Other cultures did it haphazardly. India figured out shit like yoga, the Yoga Sutras, and you know, and the early traditions that represent that are preserved to this day, Buddhism and Jainism, those arose, they were part of the Indic miracle. What arose there was a whole lifestyle around systematically developing concentration, clarity, equanimity, etc. But if you look at their epistemology, if you look at the epistemology of Jainism, and if you look at the epistemology of Buddhism, it's completely modern. It is, if I were to summarize what Buddhism has to say about generating narratives and evaluating narratives for the quality of their information, it's four things. If you're going to rely on anything, rely on evidence and logic. Respect respectable authority, but don't rely on it. And above all, have a healthy sense of skepticism, which I'm going to say at a deep level becomes a very mature form of decentered faith. Yeah, interesting juxtaposition of words that came out of my mouth, but I can justify the phrase. Okay, so Buddhism, Jainism, what arose in the miracle that came in the axial age of, see, you had Archimedes, you had Euclid, you had Aristotle. I mean, there was a Greek miracle, and not all of science, but it was very important for science. But there was another miracle happening on the other side of that world in India, right around the same time. They call it the axial age, 5th century, 6th century BC, even to maybe 4th century. So in India, they just sat down and fucking practiced until they could focus without wavering. And then they had ascetical practices that led to the notion of tapas, which leads to equanimity, which is one of the main focus factors. You could systematically develop the ability to sit through fading pain with a smile on your face consistently. People can do it. People do it. Um, and they did, they went about it systematically, and that's why we have the word yoga, uh, and so forth. So if you look at the epistemological system that went with this, it's the best summary of how science views the world. But they didn't train that. They trained sensory focus factors. What I'm advocating for a lot of reasons is that we add in verbal agility and mental agility training as focus factors. And we techniqueify how those things can be developed, just like you can sit down and focus on your breath and it will develop. It's a dumbass thing, but if you do it enough, your life changes. We'll show you how to summarize a topic from a perspective with a sensitivity to dimensional analysis and careful definition. We'll show you how to do that for any topic you want. We'll call the technique word power. And if you want to organize your shopping spree with word power, we'll show you how to do that. If you want to organize the political argument you're going to have with your neighbor about the national elections of your country, we'll help you do that too. Um, whatever is relevant to you will. And then we'll sensitize you to basic Bayesian notions. It's not a class in logic. They're not going to know what Bayes' theorem is, but they're going to be given some vocabulary that allows for the surface to access active inference in the depths. Just a few little prompts that's going to help them think more in terms of logic, evidence, authority, and skepticism in a healthy way. And that's a training in mental agility. So I've added two focus factors, but they're really just one focus factor. And when you combine the emotional maturity, self-control, and anti-fragility that you get from the sensory focus techniques with the ability to speak carefully about a topic, to organize your thoughts so you really say what you mean. It's not the same as meaning what you say. Everyone thinks they mean what they say, fine. But did you say what you meant? We can train people to do that. And what you're claiming or what you say is good information, well, evidence, logic, authority, skepticism, let's talk a little bit about those factors. Those are things to consider when you're saying, I believe Trump is the right choice for America, and America is the right choice for the world, or whatever you believe. Um, how much logic? How much evidence are is who you're respecting respectable as an authority? And what about your definition of healthy skepticism? What's healthy skepticism for you? Let's talk about that. So these are the focus factors that we systematically train. And the reason I use the word factor in this context is this is factor in the sense of list all the factors that influence your happiness and the happiness of the world as you conceive of the world. You could ask someone, like, what are the things that are positive or negative for me locally or for the people I care about more broadly? What are the factors that will make them happy? What are the factors that will do the opposite of that? So those are happiness factors, you might say, felicity factors. So what most people leave out of the list is focus factors. And that's why most people need to know about focus factors, because they're really, really, really important, both at the individual level and at larger community level. These things are really important for our species. What characterizes focus factors? Well, they're related to how we focus attention, hence the term focus. They factor into our happiness, but also they are somewhat controllable through training. They're trainable, simple, basic skills associated with paying attention in different ways that are eminently trainable in the sense that they grow exponentially. And as time goes on, they weigh more and more positively to bring about an individual's happiness or even a larger aggregate, a community's happiness. So systematic focus training in the service of multidimensional human flourishing will be our definition of practice or mindfulness practice or a focus path. And the system is a working example of this. I would describe it as a science-informed focus path, which is simultaneously a focus-informed science path for life. So that's a little bit of the ontology that I and my community will be using. So whatever you would like to ask about the big data dump that I just gave you, or other directions that you would like to, hear about, but I wanted to sort of just give you those basics because that's the 1,000-yard view of the landscape as uh, as I like to approach it as a science researcher slash mindfulness coach. So now I'll turn it over to you, whatever you'd like to take it.
Um, Thank you. And I suppose the first things that keep grabbing my mind are well, many, but two of them that are rising to the surface are uh, that statement about skepticism as a kind of decentered faith, and then and also exponential. And um,
Yeah, those are keys. Decentered faith. So historically, the actual skeptics in ancient Greece, their central practice was to cultivate what I would call equanimity with don't know. They called it epiche, Epoche. That's the anglicized pronunciation. Uh, who knows how they spoke, but epoche is probably what it sounded like in Athens. Epoche. It means in Greek to suspend. Suspend what? The need to know. Towards what goal? In order to access a different kind of knowing. They used to walk through the marketplace with a defocused gaze, trusting their intuition to avoid collisions, etc. That's very much like Zen practices that are done today. When you do work in a Zen temple, you do exactly that same thing. um, so the original skeptics were trying to, and even the word skeptikos means, well, we're just observing. We're not making any hypotheses. The other philosophers have ideas. We don't. We don't have ideas. We suspend the need to have ideas as an alternative path to wisdom function. So historically, skepticism meant something very similar to what Zen master Lin Ji in the Tang Dynasty in China would have said, would have called, have faith in who you are. Have faith in the authentic human with no fixed position that inhabits you and animates you like a puppeteer. Um, I think he was talking about the taste of free energy change, but that remains just a conjecture at this point. So um, when you let go of the need to orient yourself conceptually and perceptually, that's actually a specific flavor of equanimity. It's equanimity with don't know. And yeah, the Greeks had a word for it, epiche, Epoche. So if you read the Wuman Guan, the Gateless Gate, it's a Zen classic from Tang Dynasty or Song Dynasty China. It the first koan in there, it it talks about um, becoming a giant mass of emotionally charged confusion and holding that until clarity arises. And then you'll understand what the masters of the past have understood. That's what it promises in the preface to this classic. So, decentered spontaneity in arises from equanimity with don't know, which is actually can be a very creative wisdom function. And when that decentered spontaneity flows in a way that most of the humans around you agree, you were loved in life and missed in death because you had refined how you carry yourself in the world and you had served the world. If that just happens, then you're a master and you are a magic robot. Robbie is my mascot. So that's what I'm talking about, broadly speaking. That's why I use that strange phrase. I think science, at least if you ask me, and if someone else says something else, fine, or fuck them. But if either way, really, uh, if you ask me, from my experience with science as a human activity, uh, science imparts um, a a confidence based in a deep humility. And if scientists come off as being less than humble, well, I think they should rethink their service mission to the world. Uh, Modern science is completely decentered. I mean, it's still science. You can't just make it up as you go. But the kinds of things that a modern scientist would say, oh, that's intriguing, or, huh, or, these are mystical schmystical to the scientists of the past. Nima Arkani Hamid says, space-time has to go. To make progress in physics, we just have to forget about space-time. Well, you know, that's calculus on manifolds is how we got here with science. And now you're saying, yeah, chuck that. Well, we need something else. And no one says you are doing bad science. I mean, the ways that people like Michael Levin and uh, Lee Cronin are thinking about information and energy and chemistry and life. I mean, it's so out there. It's so transgressive of boundaries. But no one says, oh, that can't be because the world is solid. Look, I can kick a rock and it's solid. So my, you just have to have experiment, and you have to have mathematical models, and you have to have massive consilience from a gazillion sides for a long time, and you come up with some really quality information, even though the kinds of things you're talking about would have caused the scientists of a few centuries ago to say, that's not science, that's not the material world, this is some Platonic abstraction. Um, so I view modern science as incredibly flexible and decentered in the good sense of not holding on to priors that may not be helping us. So, so much for the decentered creativity, humility, and uh, vitality. And then the other one was what was the other phrase that jumped out?
Uh, exponential.
Yeah, that's big. So I think, but I don't have evidence. I mean, massive scientific evidence. Uh, what I think is that in general, training with focus factors grows exponentially. So that's good news and bad news. The bad news is initially it might not be, yeah, you see the curve. I don't have to explain it to you. It looks like lackluster linear for a while. Yeah, okay. If the shoe fits, if the sandal fits, take it off, put it on your head or something. Uh, so, uh, lackluster linear. Now, there's some things we can say about that, but on the good side, if we can keep you at it long enough, you will have that hockey stick break point. And that's it, the mechanism is exactly what you would expect from regular science. It's positive feedback. It's when the rewards start to come predictably and soon. You taste concentration, clarity, equanimity by the end of a sit, and then by the middle of a sit, and then at the beginning of the sit, and then as you're bopping around in the world, you're as deep as your deepest state in a retreat 10 years ago, but you're in the shopping mall. But your taste of concentration, clarity, and equanimity is right there. You're always being rewarded. So when you start to get the pleasant focus factors and you develop a taste for these subtle rewards that are intrinsic to them, that's when the operant conditioning starts to reach the unconscious. That's my hypothesis. And I do think it's operant conditioning, it's reward stuff to the subconscious that then encourages more and more focus factor. So one of the main jobs of a mindfulness coach is keep people practicing until they start to get the exponential rewards. Uh, so actually, you might say it happens twice. the first time when you start to get, you really get the feedback from it, that tends to make you want to have a commitment to practice, right? And we want to get that as soon as possible with people. But then later on, typically, maybe several decades or more towards later on in your life, there's another exponential thing that happens. And that sort of shoots you into a whole other thing. Uh, that's where your happiness now really does not depend on conditions. You could just be locked in a box for decades and you'd be fine. And you see, oh yeah, that's all it takes. You just have to be good at not be good at not being unhappy. And actually, that's not so hard. So anyway, uh, uh, how to release the exponential potential is definitely an issue. So one is, well, we're going to talk about the components of a systematic practice in a few minutes. And one thing is get set up with that and just keep doing it. That's one thing. But there's two other factors to consider. The bad shit that happens in life motivates people to do practice because actually, if it's bad enough, nothing else will help. But practice actually will. I have seen it help where you wouldn't think it can help. People with really horrifically shattered lives, you wouldn't think they could get a life back. But I have seen it happen if there's a commitment to practice. So it's the big guns. So when bad stuff happens, which is going to happen to you, to me, to everyone, that's when people are ready to, okay, I'll try something. If someone is there to take them by the hand during their crisis, then they're going to get huge psycho-spiritual growth comparable to going off to a monastery. You know, it's householder's monastery, a visit to the hospital. Or you realize you've got a substance abuse issue. You're going to have to make a behavior change. That kind of stuff. The good news is, if someone is there to guide you, you can get some of that exponential stuff during that crisis. And that becomes an entree to practice. Now, what Jay and I and our friends are hoping is that we've got a new thing from technology. We think ultrasound will be, we think ultrasonic biomodulation and specifically ultrasonic neuromodulation and specifically transcranial ultrasonic neuromodulation. We think that this technology will be ubiquitous in standard world medicine in the next 5-10 years. We think means a bunch of people have an opinion, but we're in the field. And they'll be miniaturized. The technology already exists to do it. Miniaturized and miniaturized medical grade um, brain zappers, acoustic brain zapper, basically, massaging the brain in various ways. And we think they'll be used because the research is diversifying. We think they'll be used for a huge clinical range. So they'll be manufactured. You may need a prescription. They may be safe enough for over the counter. We don't know what the regulatory path will be around the world for these kinds of devices. But there's a thought that if you have access to a doctor, you have access to a medical grade acoustic brain zapper. We're pretty sure that we can induce equanimity and perhaps induce it profoundly with the ultrasound. That seems to be what's happening with people. And since equanimity is, as far as I'm concerned, if I had to just choose one focus factor, it's the one I would choose. It's the only one you can fall back on. Um, the anyway, if it turns out that something that everyone has access to, if they have access to modern medicine, if that device also significantly accelerates early mindfulness training, where the hurdle is, as you mentioned, and if you can just get it from a doctor, then if the new conversational AI is paired with that device, you now have a 24/7 personal coach for free, plus a biologically based training accelerator. And this is a plan to democratize access to uh, the best outcomes for all humans with respect to the impact of personalized, systematic, and perhaps tech accelerated focus training in the service of both personal and planetary flourishing, live strong, live well, live with meaning. That's some of the ways that I organize my ontology that I wanted to share with you, both for research and for yourself. So I would say the main practical goal is to sort of outline the components of systematic practice and get you set up with those components. So, 6 things, and you need all 6, and they work together. So, in terms of what we might call the rhythm of practice. We say a practice is systematic if you have a rhythm of retreat practice alternating with life practice. So life practice is what you do day to day, formal practice, informal practice, in stillness, in motion, perhaps in life situations, perhaps in the meditation room, what have you. In between retreats, systematically organizing the day, strategizing which situations in the day you'll apply techniques or not, depending. So you sort of, in your habit, mental habit, you monasticize each ordinary day and you weave formal and informal intentional practice in a systematic way throughout the life activities of your days. So that's life practice. And one of the jobs of a coach is to get you set up with that structure. Life practice, we call it. And there's a life practice website that you can go to that documents this. Then there's retreat practice. So people tend to think of retreats traditionally, I go away, I'm with a group of people in a center for a weekend or a week or longer. But retreat just means an uninterrupted formal practice, intentional practice. And we define it very loosely. It can be as short as a 4-hour unbroken practice period that you do on your own. That's a micro retreat because you may not be able to get away for a week or whatever, but you can do micro retreats. But then in post-COVID, almost all of our retreats are delivered over the internet now, and it works just fine. And it's very, very convenient for people. Maybe they have to do some of their life activities, but they can still be on a retreat. And the fact that they have to attend to life and they're in the environment that stimulates their, daily concerns. Well, we do this for your daily concerns, right? So practice in that environment. Yeah, it's hard, but it doesn't cost anything. In the old days, you had to travel. You had to leave your family and job. So retreat practice, it can be solo, it can be short, it can be guided over the internet. But you want to do at least the equivalent of one retreat per year. That's the equivalent of a week of unbroken practice, but you can break it up into half day or 1 day or weekend, and it can be facilitated over the internet. It doesn't have to be, I go to a center, but you can also go to centers. Now, I should say the system essentially is an ontology for all forms of practice. So no matter whose retreat you go to, as far as we're concerned, that's good because it's called unified mindfulness because we want you to see the unity of the world's focus paths, not because we have yet another competitor and try our product. Success with means you recognize quality anywhere in a program and you have a context and you can utilize that. So we're in this mutual support. So it doesn't have to be our retreats. any competent teacher's retreats. Um, so the rhythm is a rhythm of retreat practice and life practice. They complement each other. On retreats, you tend to make breakthroughs. You go back to life practice, you consolidate those breakthroughs, and sometimes windows and walls appear in the real world that push your practice forward also. That's part of life practice. Retreat practice, life practice, that's your rhythm. Any questions about that or how we can get you set up for that kind of thing, the rhythm of your life? You look to me pretty buff. Do you work out?
Constantly.
Seriously? That's great. That's great because you could make your physical workouts do double duty as quality mindfulness, formal practice. You just implement a technique of your choice. We can talk about that. But that's already time during the day where you can be doing formal practice, even though it's in motion and even though you're doing what you need to do. Uh, that's that counts. So that's something we can talk about.
Uh,
Uh,
I love
yeah,
that.
yeah. Um, what kind of exercises do you do, or physical activities?
It's pretty varied. A lot of it would be like weightlifting with a barbell, but um, I'm oftentimes walking and listening to audio transcripts of academic papers that I've made, text to speech audio transcripts, um, and trying to focus on those as I walk. So that's another thing I do. But for so I'm
Well, your walking can also be a mindful walking. You have the option.
so, and that's basically I'm either chained to a computer writing, or I'm walking and listening to articles, or working out, rinse repeat. So much of that's it's fairly monastic already, actually.
And
Now,
with this, you make a living? No,
no,
there's an old joke
that's
with
what I'm
that.
chained to
I
the computer.
say what?
That's what I'm chained to the computer.
How do you make that the living at the computer?
Uh, I try to create compelling and hopefully accurate models of things. So in this case,
Oh, so in other words, people pay you to do what is it, programming?
oh God, no. Usually would be well, sometimes, but it would be at the moment papers would be on I guess the neuroscience and psychology of psychedelics, and computational models of consciousness and goal-oriented behavior. So
I mean, it's great work, but people pay you to do this? Or
sometimes it's challenging. It also it requires some grant writing also.
okay, yeah.
Half of it is being able to get to uh, work with people to actually get the financials worked out. Yeah.
Well, what a great service to um, be doing that kind of job. Um, okay, so um, what has been your experience with retreats so far? Have you done them ever, frequently? With whom? What happened?
Um, I guess the closest would be maybe 3 days at a Mind and Life Summer Research Institute, scattered over 3 years. a while ago. Um, and otherwise not, and
Okay, well, yeah, the answer is,
two sessions of
oh,
about 4 hours. So two half-day sessions.
oh, two half-day session.
Yeah, so
Uh,
micro.
with whom? Who
Um,
is the teacher?
it was a Rinzai monk in Chicago, Mado Moore Sensei. Mado Moore Sensei was
Uh-huh. Who was their teacher?
I don't know.
Okay. Not a lot of retreat experience. Well, so actually, the question, what was that like for you, is probably not so relevant because it's just, you're just dipping your toes.
It was a lifetime ago.
Yeah. So um, it sounds like you have flexibility in your schedule. So you can allocate time uh, to do retreats. Is that correct? Yeah. So I'd encourage you to do that. Uh, you're in Illinois? Is that where you
Uh,
live?
in Baltimore at the moment.
You're in Balt. Oh yeah, it's like the third time you told me. You're
I,
at
I mean, I'm I'm
Hopkins.
I'm from
Yeah,
Chicago originally. So
yeah. I think maybe, I don't know why I keep making that mistake, but um,
where I spent most of my life. So I sometimes make that mistake too.
uh, so uh, well, there's lots of meditation centers, and now that we're sort of coming out from under COVID, you know, there you can see who's doing what with whatever you want. What I can tell you is the community runs internet-based retreats constantly. Um, the You can go to my personal website, uh, and you can see my retreats that I'm running. Some of them are just 4-hour programs. Uh, we call it the home practice program. That's on the second weekend of each month, Friday through Saturday. We give one 2-hour on Friday and then two 4 hours on Saturday, and same thing on Sunday. So you can do one or a combination monthly of our home practice programs. Then I give longer retreats through different organizations. There'll be a week-long retreat here or even a 2-week retreat there. Um, so you can find out, you can go to the home practice program, you can go to my website for the retreats that I'm leading, and then the main training of trainers is done at unifiedmindfulness.com. That's Juliana Ray's um, training hub. And they run retreats, including completely free retreats, um, uh, frequently. So there's, lots of places where you can do retreats, but um, I'd encourage you to sort of think about what your resources are. Do you want them to be self retreats? Do you want it to be on the ground with a group? Do you want it to be over the air with a group? If so, what teachers? But somehow establish and maintain in your life, even if it's parceled out in 4-hour micro doses, you get about the equivalent of a week, 10 days of retreat per year, every year, no matter what. That would be a sort of minimum quantitative aspect of retreat practice. Life practice, we can talk about that, but there's also a life practice website, which is all about just that, how you structure uh, daily life. So that's the rhythm, the two aspects of the rhythm: retreat practice, life practice. Essentially, life practice is an algo. In the morning, when you wake up, you strategize about the day. What situations will I be in today? In some of those situations, I'll just be taking care of business. That's fine. In others of those situations, I'm going to be doing intentional practice. Could be in stillness, could be in motion, could be a micro hit, could be extended. What techniques will I use? What focus factors am I interested in? What have I learned in the past in those situations with these techniques and these focus factors? What directions would I like to grow moving forward? You strategize. Then you implement that strategy. And then at the end of the day, when you hit the sack, you assess briefly, okay, what um, uh, what did I do today in meditation? Did I put in a day? Did I implement what I strategized? What worked, what didn't work, etc. So if you sort of organize each day between retreats that way, you've got life practice. So any question about the sort of two aspects to the rhythm?
I mean, it's encouraging that like I don't think I'll be able to get away for like an extended retreat in the near future. There's just too many spinning plates. And so like, but if the I can accumulate with like 4 hour sessions, uh something
Yeah,
that
that's right. And that's what we tell everyone. In
that's
the modern, yeah, it's everyday life for everyday people on the seven continents as it is now in the world, not as it is in North America, as it is everywhere in the world. For humans, we want the components of systematic practice to be doable. If you got family, if you got responsibilities, and if you live in a certain country, you're not going to be able to just go off to a meditation center, but you can do retreats and life practice the way I just described it. And that's the whole goal. That's what we mean when we say it's fully modern. It's set up for everyday life of everyday people. So, yes. So now get support, give support. The support dimension has sort of two sides to it. Well, get support. You're getting support now. uh, but every book you ever read about meditation, if it's a good one, most of them are, uh, that gave you support. Um, Apps that you might use, teachers that you might interact with at retreats, for example. One of the main reasons people do retreats is that they have access to teachers, so they get support. So you have me to talk about your practice occasionally, but you can go to unifiedmindfulness support desk, and you can get access to a cadre of highly qualified um, mindfulness coaches. The system is MacDharma in the good sense. It's hamburger college for being a modern mindfulness coach. So anyone that's on that desk, I'd stand by them that they've been certified. They're, they're not necessarily a professional, but they're a very competent paraprofessional mindfulness coach. So that's something, is another way you can get support. But just all the resources that help your practice, that's all support. It may seem strange that I mentioned give support at the beginning, but first of all, in math, one of the big secrets in math is looking at ordinary stuff with extraordinary eyes. It's just ordinary things that you now look upon in a different way. And looking upon things in a different way is very important. So, how do you look upon a teacher? What is a person who supports mindfulness practice? What is a mindfulness coach or trainer or teacher? Call them what you want. What do they do? Well, they support people's practice in a very broad sense. It's not just you explain things or you guide people with techniques or you encourage them. You teach by who you are, by what you have become as the result of this practice. You teach by your vibe, which is not manipulated. It's just where you're coming from. It's the presence of your absence when people encounter you. So the positive effects that mindfulness has on a person, people around that person, they notice. And even strangers pick up on it, albeit subliminally, perhaps. So you're already a teacher as soon as you're practicing in that subtle sense. But subtle is really important on this path. The other thing is when you actually learn techniques, we actually, after you master a technique or understand a technique, we actually give you the assignment to teach it to someone else. It's the same as medical school. See one, do one, teach one, that philosophy. So you're already a teacher. You're already giving support. It's just, how do you think of yourself? Am I a lowly student who's confused about practice? No, I'm a teacher already. I'm doing the practice. So that's what I mean by getting support and giving support. Any questions about that?
I think that if I'm thinking of it right, that should also like help with my motivation to do it because
Yes,
it's not
that's
just
right.
about me. Like I don't know if I would be willing to put in the effort just for me.
Yeah, it's not just about you.
Yeah.
It's about whoever you care about, and it's about whoever they care about. So it's about everyone in the end. It just branches out. Um, whatever motivates you. You're already giving as soon as you're receiving. It's a way of looking at things. This is the way I was trained in Japanese Vajrayana originally. The day you start meditating and the day you attain Buddhahood are the same day. Um, what is it T.S. Eliot says?
And at the end of all
Searching?
exploring,
No,
searching.
he said a lot of things, but I was thinking of something else. What was it?
Hmm.
The moment in the rose garden and the moment of the yew tree are of equal duration. That's in, so in Europe, apparently, they planted yew trees in the cemeteries as some symbol of rebirth, eternal life, something like that. So while you were alive for 5 minutes when the sun was shining in an English rose garden, that moment, and the eternity you're going to spend under the ground are of equal duration. It's in the poem, probably in reality too. But in any event, yes, find that motivation and get support, give support. So, two more things. You need a menu and you need a framework. By a menu, I mean a toolkit, a set of meditation techniques, one or more. There's 40 standard ones in the system. They more or less are like basis vectors that span all the different techniques of the world. It's like the technique grid is called the ultra grid, Universal Library for Training Attention. It's 40 techniques that you can think of as basis vectors that, like all the other techniques that you'll encounter anywhere, are sort of explained in terms of linear combinations of these things. That was my goal. So you need at least one technique. We usually start people out with see, hear, feel. And you can learn that for free at Juliana's unifiedmindfulness.com website. You can take the online, it's a full-on interactive training in our signature technique. It's our version of choiceless awareness, basically. Open presence, call it what you want. But we call it see, hear, feel. So that's usually the first technique we teach people for a number of reasons. Most important one is you can do it in motion. You can do it while you're exercising. You can do it while you drive the car, you know, etc. So you need at least one technique. You might have two or three or four or five or more, as many as you want, but they should be organized into a menu for you so that you understand how they work together to develop focus factors and how they serve also as strategies, life hacks that you can use in daily life for happiness related goals. So you need a menu. That means at least one technique. And if it's more than one technique, you understand the relationships between your techniques, how they work together to develop focus factors, but also to strategize in life. Techniques have those two sides to them. They're generic exercise like lifting weights, but they're also life hacks that you can, okay, I'm going to do this technique in that situation. You strategize. So, what else do you need? You need a conceptual framework, a model that weaves all this together. What are my happiness goals? What are my techniques? How does doing these techniques in this structure lead to my happiness goals? What about other happiness factors besides focus factors? What does mindfulness not give me that I need to supplement with other things for happiness? A an ontology, a conceptual framework that answers the standard interrogatives. What, where, when, why, how, who, whence, whither, any questions that you might have about your practice. You should have decent answers for those questions. You should have a clear framework that essentially connects what you're doing with life goals. You can connect the dots. Here's how these focus factors serve to help me make a behavior change. Here's how these focus factors serve to help me pass a course in college, etc., etc. You can connect the dots. It makes sense to you why you're doing this practice or why in general a person should. We'll call that a conceptual framework. So a conceptual framework, a organized toolkit of techniques, retreat practice, life practice, get support, give support. If those are in place, those 6 pillars, you are at that time maintaining a systematic practice. If I had one thing, I'm almost 80 years old. If I had one thing I would tell any human being, it's what some very grown up Asian people told me when I was a little kid living in Asia, as a cultural adventure. I was fortunate. I encountered enlightened masters in the fucking bathtub. I mean, seriously, what I'm passing on to you was essentially laid on me by an old monk in a Japanese bath in the temple we were talking. And it just set a course for my life. No matter what happens, no matter what happens, keep up systematic practice because stuff's going to happen. And some of it's going to be good for you in the world, and some of it's going to be bad for you in the world. And it's going to keep happening. And at the end of life, you can look back and you will have either done the practice or not. And it's all good, but It's a hell of a lot better if you've done the practice. So that would be my main advice. No matter what, establish it and then keep it going. So that would be the main thing I would help you with, because that's optimal. So any further questions just about these sort of basics? I just wanted to make sure, we covered all this territory.
Thousands of questions, but one from earlier is you mentioned uh, did you say vocal power, but being able to not just um, mean what you say, but say what you mean. So a kind
I
of
call it word power. Yeah.
word power, but kind of like ability to speak with a very clear intentionality and to have that like around that sounds really good. And around what would be a good way, so establishing a systematic practice first, and so that come later in that progression, like once it's
It's a technique. It's an actual technique within the system called word power. So you just ask a coach to teach you word power, including me. I'll teach you word power. But there's like I say, there's a grid of 40 standard techniques. And this is our latest technique. This is my attempt to capture and make relevant the spirit of science for the masses of the world. So it's also in part inspired by David Spivak's work and his community with what he calls polynomial functors, but other people call by a gazillion other names, very annoyingly and confusingly for outsiders. But in any event, essentially, it's just decision trees. But once again, thought about in a different way, in a very different way. So there's actually some pretty deep math that I'm noodling that's behind word power, but that will be a different conversation. So essentially, there's two parts to word power. And the first one is say what you mean. So we'll just talk about that one. Once again, not to belabor the point, it's an ordinary thing that you're thinking about in a different way. It's something everyone has done many, many times. If you wrote an essay and you wrote an outline for the essay, you were doing a word power exercise. If you had to give a talk and you sort of visualized, okay, I want to make sure I cover this and this, but then inside that first this, there's this, and there's this other this, and I need to sort of visualize how that's going to branch. If you've ever done that, that's word power. It's just ordinary things. It's the ability to summarize a topic from a perspective. That's all. But it's the ability to do that with an arbitrary topic and an arbitrary perspective under pressure. So it's going to be a technique like counting your breath. It's stupid. Why am I doing this? I'm counting my breath. How's that going to have any impact on my happiness? Doesn't seem related. So we're going to take a gazillion topics and a gazillion perspectives and have you have a go at organizing it. See how good you can do, how quick you can do it. Um, Over and over and over again. Uh, and then we combine that with the see, hear, feel technique to help you deal with emotions that may come up if some of those topics are sensitive to you. And eventually we'll be getting to the topic of your core values. And we'll be getting to the topic of how you see the world in general. We'll be getting to the topic of how those two may be aligned or not aligned, and how focus factors may help you have a nicer alignment there. Yeah. Starts out as a dumbass exercise. How am I going to organize my day for shopping? Well, I should go here first, then I should go here, then I should go. No, maybe I should rearrange it this way. And when I do that, I should have to remember that other thing. And, oh, okay, now I sort of see how I should do my shopping spree. Or here's my core values. I've given a lot of thought to it. Here's how it branches out. Here's what the world's reflecting back to me. Now the topic is the alignment of those two topics for me as a human. We can get into this kind of material with people without telling them how they should live their lives or what they should believe. We're just helping them organize what they want to say, how they want to think. Okay, so A, B, C, D. It's as simple as that. A is what your topic is. Could be anything. B is what your view or perspective is. It could be anything. And by the way, there's no fundamental distinction between a topic and a perspective. A perspective can be a topic. A topic can be a perspective. So they can change roles, but usually want to select a topic and a perspective. So, for example, if I were to select for myself the topic of science, and my perspective would be I'm talking to a general person and I want them to understand science, I would say, so that's my A and my B. The topic is science. My context, you could call it, or perspective or view, is it's science as I understand it personally, and I'm communicating that to a general person. It's nothing specific, could be any human. I would say there's two sides to science. Science is a process, but science is also what results from that process. Often the process is called the scientific method, and what results from the process is called the achievements of science. If you go to Wikipedia, very roughly, it will break the scientific method into 4 components and will actually sort of break the field of science into 4 basic areas: formal science, physical science, biological science, human science. There's sort of a gradient there. But we're going to give a little deeper view. We're going to say that underneath science is, underneath the method of science, is something called the spirit of science. And that's the secret sauce that allows science to generate high quality information. So if we look under the achievements of science, and we want to say what in essence this is, it's true, it's good, it's beautiful. This process, the spirit of science, generates high quality information. Everyone knows it when they see it. And when I say it's high quality, it's less wrong. Not necessarily it has the truth, but it's progressively less wrong. It's true in that sense. It's good in the sense that it helps humans flourish. So it's good in the sense that it's useful. And it is beautiful structurally. A theorem, a theory, you know, when you do it right, it is beautiful. So that's quality information. That's the essence that's behind. That's how I would characterize the achievements of science. So science, that's how I would talk about science. So that's my word power organization. First, I think we're talking about science and we're talking about the general context. I got my A, I got my B. My basic components that I'm going to bring out are the scientific method, the achievements of science, the spirit of science that lies behind the scientific method, and the essence of the achievements of science, which is this high quality information in the service of human happiness. So I've got this thing outlined. It's like, okay, from this perspective, this topic, I talk about these 4 things. But then if you ask me details, I can branch out on each of those 4. There's 5 things to understand about the spirit of science. And each of those has 4 components. That's 20 things. I see the array if you ask me about the spirit of science. If you ask me about human flourishing, I've got a similar detailed branching out. We'll cover these dimensions and these dimensions. So I have organized this topic in a way that I personally find satisfactory. I applied word power to the topic, explain science to the world. That's an example. It's just a carefully crafted in terms of structure, and then you think through the words very carefully. Are these the right words for this context, do they distill enough information? Do they cover everything that needs to be covered? Is there discrimination where there needs to be discrimination? You sort of polish the words. And then maybe you decide, I don't want 4 components, I want 5 components, and you redo it. And then you try it out in the field. And then you come back and you do some more word power. And if it's something that has a lot of sensitivity, or people's are invested in it, then you have these other sensory techniques like see, hear, feel to untangle and unblock the emotional reactions. And those are techniques too. So you can interweave the word power, which is a conceptual focus factor training. In a session, you can interweave that with sensory focuses that help people have more self-awareness, emotional maturity, self-control, anti-fragility. All of those come from things like see, hear, feel techniques, which are sensory focused. You weave those two together. Now you're dealing with both the training the rational part of the person, but also training them to, yes, have emotion, but not be had by emotion. So that's sort of how a little bit of intro to word power. But once again, if you email me, you should email me prompting me to actually send you a bunch of resources. I mean, we recorded a lot of the things I said. You can see there's a plethora out there, but there's some resources on word power that I would have to send you, which they're not on the internet yet. So I'll send you some of that for your reference. As I
Very grateful.
say, it's my attempt to make relevant to everyday people the ability that we scientists get professionally to speak precisely and reason reasonably. So anyway, that's that. Any other questions? Oh my God, it's 10 already. I have a 10 o'clock appointment. Um, let me see if I can stay on with you and go to that. If I lose you, I'll rejoin you here. I'm klutzy with this stuff. How do I get this to be smaller? I don't want to. Wait a minute. Oh, okay. Okay. Let me try something. Hi. Hi. Um, you know what? I have to go, unfortunately. Are we good for now?
Um, yes, you've given me a lot to look into and a lot of motivation.
Oh,
So,
great. Well, this is to be continued. We'll have another meeting. Email me to prompt me to send you a bunch of links and whatever. Start exploring. Via email, we'll set up another meeting like this. Um, if possible, go to Juliana's website and take the Introduction to See, Hear, Feel uh, interactive course that sits there. Um, that will help me the next time we meet. You don't have to do it, but if you already know the whys and wherefores of our signature technique, it'll save me a lot of time in, interacting with you. Um, Now you can also get a coach. You can pay them. They're worth every penny of it. Absolutely. It's the best way to go. And see, they can meet with you every week, uh, you know, and they're getting paid. So they're a professional. They'll deliver. That's another option. But uh, there's free service, or there's I think they call it the desk. Uh, it's either free or it's not very much to join, and you get access to live coaches that way also. But in any event, we'll set up another meeting. Thank you for listening to this endless stream of data. But
thank you.
we pretty much covered the territory, set things up, and to be continued. I think it's going to be great, and I'm stoked, not just for your practice, but for the science that I think is coming.
It is.
So to be continued.
Thank you.